Today on CityCast DC. With the explosion of AI, data centers have proliferated, and the DC metro area is the focal point of all of it, with Northern Virginia leading the way. Now, Prince George County lawmakers are debating whether or not to build a new data center amid rising water use and surging electricity costs. Jenny Abamu from WAMU joins us to explain how these data centers became so popular and what it means for the locals who live near them. Today's Thursday, January 15th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Jenny, welcome to the show. I am so excited to talk to you because I know data centers has been, I guess I would call it a bit of a hot topic here in the DC area. I did doors for the last election where I was just like knocking on doors and talking to voters. And I don't think I've ever heard more clearly from voters that they are concerned about data centers. One person was like, hang on one second, went into their house, left me on their porch, came back with a electric bill in their hands to be like, do you see how much my electric bill is? Wow. It's the data centers. So for folks who are unfamiliar, what exactly is a data center and what do they do?
So data centers are these big servers that basically are designed to process AI, help them run, store the information. It is your cloud in physical form.
Is it true that 70% of the world's internet traffic runs through the DC metro area?
Particularly Northern Virginia. Yes,
Why is
that
that?
Is true. Well, Northern Virginia took the lead on allowing data centers to, and getting the bids for data centers to run there. And it's a vibrant area. The transmission lines are there. They've designed this whole zone that is specifically for data center development and made it easy for them to develop in that region.
I feel like I have heard pretty loud and clear that residents don't like the idea of data centers being in their neighborhoods, being things that are nearby. What are you hearing from folks?
So this is fascinating because residents in particular, now, if there are residents who are very pro data centers, I don't hear that often from them. So I want to be fair to that. And in that, the people who are against data center development are loud about it. And it is uniting a lot of different constituencies in a way that I haven't seen other issues unite constituencies in a very long time. And so, yes, there is a movement, I would say, against data center development in different parts of the country. And it's bringing together a host of people that normally wouldn't have been together on issues passionately against these developments.
So when I look into, who's saying what about data centers, what I have found is the people who are saying data centers are good. One, it's usually elected officials or, people with some kind of financial incentive for data centers. It is certainly not people who might be living near them. And what they say is, having a data center, it's going to bring so many jobs to your community. Now, having looked into that, I have actually not seen that to be the case. What are your findings?
So a lot of people will not cite the jobs. That's actually not the thing that a lot of people will say, at least that I've heard in terms of what data centers bring. But they do cite the revenue and the tax revenue that it brings to counties and cities and things like that. So if you look at places like Loudoun County, you will see that they do credit data centers with fully funding their schools, right? That's a big deal. I used to be an education reporter, and funding school budgets is just huge. And a lot of Virginia residents also receive tax rebates. And that's significant to a lot of places, especially in Maryland, where there's high taxes, where schools are not fully funded. There's a lot of over the Potomac, envy, I would say, that a lot of the elected officials have in Maryland in particular, when they look at Virginia and see that they're able to do all those things for their residents in the way that they are not able to do. And so there is real money that flows through. Even if a lot of it has gotten siphoned off because of tax breaks, you still see the state, you still see the localities receiving a lot of money from that development and from the process and the taxes on the equipment, et cetera, that exists there. And so this is what people look at when they look at data center development. There's also like the other case, which is a bit more, I would say, higher up, which is the national security argument that people make for it. There's this idea like, oh, we need to win the AI race. And the only way for us to win that AI race is for us to allow more data center development. You'll hear a lot more of that from the federal government, though.
Just so I'm aware, the bit about data centers having fully funded the schools, is that accurate? Is that just sort of what people are saying? But that is true?
Yeah. Oh, that is true. That is true in Loudoun County, at least. And so what you'll see in Loudoun County, if you go and check the money that's flown there, it has led to fully funded schools. So this is something that's big, and people look at that and they say, "Oh, look at us! This is what we have. This is what the officials there have in that we've gotten all this money from these data centers that we've allowed to proliferate throughout Loudoun County. If you go to Loudoun County, they're everywhere, right? They're not even like that far away from residents. And this is where people are. But you do have the payoff of whatever you're paying in different ways for those centers to exist, whether it's your electricity bill, whether it's your air pollution, noise pollution, things like that. Those are all things that the county is weighing. And they're even saying they're going to remove their by right development layer that they have in the county because of all of the complaints that people have had because of how it looks, et cetera, all the pollution type style complaints that are happening there. So there's a lot of going back and forth in terms of there are some real monetary benefits that they have actually seen. It's not necessarily completely made up.
Well, you were sort of getting at this, but, the financial benefits, I bet some people listening might say that is mighty hard to disagree with. I want funded schools. I want, to live in a well-funded place. What are some of the complaints that residents have about these data centers in their community?
And the reason I say like completely made up is because like the issue that people debate is like we haven't quantified the cost. And so like this is what people say like, oh, what about the water use? What about like all of those environmental factors and other factors? Those are things that people will argue that the cost of those things have not been calculated. And because of that, the financial benefit might not, if you actually calculated those things, maybe my financial benefit might not be as high as it looks on paper right now. But those are all like things that you have to kind of take into consideration as you go after these data centers. And you're looking at these localities that really are looking for revenue sources. They have all these abandoned malls, all these things that people say, let's do something else with them. And part of that they're looking at is the data center development. Now, I would say a lot of residents on the other side of that, the biggest argument is I've seen like 3 large camps of people who are upset with data centers. I would say the first would be the environmentalists, people who are really concerned about the air, the water, the land, and those type of things. And that group, they are, I would say, mostly in a lot of places leading the charge in the movement and organizing against the data centers. And then you also have the groups that are anti the tech oligarchy. And these are oftentimes more leftist groups that see data centers as the physical being of tech billionaires and, this thing that people have kind of grown to hate, especially with, Elon Musk and Doge in this region in particular. And then the third group of people I would say are more residents who hate their electric bill right now. And that I feel like that group is very interesting because that is a constituency of all kinds of people. And, at the end of the day, they're not that worried about the tech oligarchy. They're not even that worried about the environment, but they are worried about their table stakes budget in their house. And they're looking at the electric bill and saying, this is not going to work for me.
Well, I'm curious, and I don't know if this is a question that you can answer, but, if I'm running a household, I work, I've got kids, I've got bills, everything is so expensive, the cost of everything has gone up. Why should I have to pay via paying my electric bill for the United States to win the AI race? Like, what? If that was my question as a resident, what do you think somebody who was pro AI center would say? Like, why should that be a cost that's passed down to me?
So what I hear from people the elected officials kind of look at it as it's the same reason why you pay your taxes for the military budget. That's how they look at it. They look at it like we're defending the country. And so if you're looking at that, like if you look at it from that like existential threat type of direction, they look at it that way. So they're seeing themselves in the middle of this, big battle over AI, and you as a resident are kind of ponying up your tax to defend the homeland. And so that's one argument. The other argument, some people, there's multiple arguments that people have. One of them is that you're kind of already paying for AI and data centers and you're not going to benefit from them. So like right now, whether you live in Northern Virginia or not, whether you get the money that Loudoun County Schools gets or not, you're paying for their data centers. Like, because the grid in this region is connected to 13 states and DC. And whatever happens in one part of the grid impacts other parts of the grid. And so because of that, we have to have updates to our grid because of capacity issues. And so and they say, oh, well, Maryland, when we update the whole grid, you also benefit from those upgrades. So you have to pay a little bit for the upgrades. Now, those upgrades might have never been needed if Virginia didn't have so many data centers.
Right.
But now there needs to be upgrades, and we all have to pay for those upgrades. And
I don't know if this is a win. I don't know if this argument is like actually going to win residents over who feel like they're just paying and paying and paying and paying and not really
getting. Well, right now it's not. That's why the movement against data centers is growing, right? You're seeing this all over the country. And so right now, people are looking at the costs and they're looking at the benefit and they're not really convinced. Right? You're seeing a lot of people who are not convinced and they're very vocal about not being convinced about it. And there's also the concern that this is all a big bubble. And so they're like wondering, am I going to give up my land, my water, my air to these billionaires as they would look at it and say, and then what happens after that? What happens if something goes wrong? Am I also going to bail them out? So there are a lot of real questions and concerns about what residents are being asked to do and what they're getting, the payoff that they might or may not receive from it. And right now, in a lot of localities, you have extensive tax breaks on the state and local level for these developers to come into the community. So it's not clear that they'll immediately see a benefit.
Don't miss Folger Theater's 4th Annual Reading Room Festival on stage January 22nd through the 25th at the Folger Shakespeare Library. Join us as we collaboratively re-envision Shakespeare's works, explore the vibrant musicality of Shakespeare's verses, and reimagine the stories crafted by other early modern playwrights in this 4-day festival of staged readings, panel discussions, workshops, and community celebrations. This year's lineup features works from Alexa Babakania, Alberto Bonilla, Barbara Fuchs, and Marcus Gardley, with Arena Stage's artistic director, Hannah S. Sharif, directing one staged reading. Celebrate the spirit of collaborative theater making and community with the Folger. Enjoy all the festival has to offer for only $125 by purchasing an all-access pass at folger.edu/readingroom. Get yours today. And I think you alluded to this a moment ago, but it is an issue that has connected and united a lot of people across a lot of different ideologies and perspectives and viewpoints, environmentalists, but then you have people who probably aren't really that moved by environmental impacts, who are just worried about the cost of their bills, who are also not into this. And I think you're right that I think that there's a sentiment right now that I completely understand that, listen, residents are being asked to pay for so much, and the idea that us, the little guy, the individual, is being raked over the coals so that Elon Musk can get more money, so that the government can get more money, I think that's a sentiment that people, I don't think it's a winning argument right now. I think we're seeing that with how many different types of people are coming together to say, hey, we're not so sold on these data centers, even if it might result in fully funded schools like in Loudoun County.
So that's the real debate. I think what I heard from council members before, why they wanted the data centers is because they're looking for revenue, like they're looking for ways for their counties to make money. You're looking at counties in particular in Maryland that have been raked over the coals this last few months in terms of job loss by the federal government. You're looking at grants that have been lost that would have gone to the communities. You're looking at even the FBI building that was supposed to be developed in Prince George's County. That is now, there's a lot of debate about what will end up with that. They're still, if you ask elected officials, they'll say they're still fighting for the FBI building. But the Trump administration is adamant that they don't want to put that in Prince George's County. And so you're looking at them kind of losing a lot of different types of things that would have helped the economy at the same time, in addition to the Commander Stadium, which is a sports stadium that's there. And they're looking at ways to try and diversify their economy. They were looking for wins, and they are competing for wins. And that's why they had this issue in the first place.
You mentioned PG County. What are the latest developments there? Because I remember there was a not insignificant amount of residents in PG County who showed up in the middle of, I think, a rainy day to protest data centers in PG County. What's the latest out there?
So right now, what you're seeing is the task force that was supposed to basically tell the county officials what they needed to do next in terms of development with data centers has concluded. They've given their recommendations. And now Prince George's County officials really need to decide what they're going to allow. And this is going to be tricky because they do want, from the people I talk to, they want data centers. They don't want them close to residences, but they do think it's important to diversify their economy.
I mean, I have to wonder, is that realistic? Like, are they really able to go someplace where they're not going to be close to residents?
I mean, there's some parts in Upper County and District 9, which it's hard for me to describe, but a little bit more rural parts of Prince George's County, and this is what is happening in a lot of places, is it goes into the more rural parts of the area. For example, Montgomery County in Maryland, the one part that has a data center development that's moving forward is in Upper Montgomery County, which is next to an agricultural reserve. It is part of an agricultural reserve, but that's kind of where they put a lot of one resident told it this way: the things that the other parts of the county don't want always end up here. And that's kind of what you're going to probably see in Prince George's County, similar.
I actually am not super familiar, so I genuinely don't know. Is that area an area where people don't actually live?
People are there. People are there, but it's not as dense.
Okay.
It's not as dense as like if you're right next to DC, for example, you'll still see them like where it's beyond the metro, we'll put it that way. So there's not, you can drive a little bit before you see a couple houses. I would say it's definitely not completely abandoned. It's a very vibrant agricultural reserve area. I went down there. It's kind of like, it looks beautiful. It's next to the water. There used to be a coal plant there before. For example, all of those, there's an incinerator there for the county. And so there are these big structures that exist there. And that part of the county also, they look at it as maybe they'll get a few jobs out of it as well. And so that's also something that they didn't mention. But it is, the promise of jobs with data centers is not, as you mentioned before, doesn't seem to always correlate.
No, I did a big reporting project on one of Elon Musk's data centers in Mississippi. And one of the big conversations there was elected officials saying, this is going to bring jobs, this is going to bring jobs. This is in a mostly Black community. And the folks there were like sharp enough to be like, that's not true. That we might be talking about a handful of maybe janitorial positions, but we're not talking about, the kind of jobs people would be excited about being in their community. And so it's interesting how you said that we have sort of moved, in the DMV area, we've sort of moved away from that jobs rhetoric, because I think by this time people know that there might be a handful of jobs, but people aren't coming in and like doing training for residents who live there to work in data centers. And that was what I was told pretty overwhelmingly, that like, wow, people are just getting sick of feeling like, they're just going to be exploited so that other people can benefit. And they're just unseen, unheard. Even if it's in a rural community, you've still got folks living out there that they're sick of this dynamic where they have to pay for other people to essentially get rich.
And I think that's also important to consider. This is why you'll see like Republicans and Democrats on this issue, because particularly in rural communities, you often find those, more conservative voters. And they are also looking at data centers and saying, we don't want this. We're getting stuck with this, and we don't want these in our communities to some extent. Now, I talked to people in Montgomery County, Upper Montgomery County, went down there, and there was a lot of maybe it will bring jobs. They thought, because that's also something that those communities also need. But there was also this, we love our reserve, we love our water, we love our land. They live for the land. That's why they're out there, and that's something that does also bring them into this anti-data center movement.
Is there a way to address the rising cost of energy that's associated with data centers?
Apart from not building them?
Is it just like there's going to be a data center and you're going to have to pay for it and it's going to be costly, or no data center? Is there any in between or anything that can be done?
Well, this is what people are saying now. So example, PJM, those are the grid regulators. I've talked to the executive director there, and this is what he's saying now. He has this whole thing called BYOG, which is like BYOB, but bring your own generation. And he's saying that new data centers that come onto the grid should somehow bring their own electric generation so they don't put strain on the grid that exists. And this is something that would need to be enforced for that to actually happen, because that hasn't happened so far. So far, data centers have come, they plug their stuff in, and it's just sucked from the entire grid. But there's a conversation in Virginia about creating a separate grid just for data centers. And then there's another conversation about data centers somehow generating their own power apart from the grid.
Is that really something that we could see?
There's a lot of money there. So they, when there's a will, there is a way in capitalism. And so that's part of that's the discussion. They're talking about building data centers in space, right, Bridget? And so there are some very lofty dreams and goals and a lot of money. They have an incredible amount of capital behind them. And so we'll see what happens there.
Are we seeing, is there much legislation for managing or legislating data centers and how they can be run?
This has been kind of conflicting because there's the localities right now in Maryland, the legislation is allowing for more leeway, right? The current legislation is trying to move regulation out of the way so that data centers can come in. That was the initial thought process before everyone started to dig into them and see the effects of them. Now there's a lot more, I would say the movement against data centers has grown. And so this next legislative session starts this week in Maryland. And I imagine that more regulation about how data centers come into places will be put. But this will be interesting to see what happens on the federal level, because the Trump administration is also saying they don't want localities legislating roadblocks for data center development. They don't want that. And so they want to figure out a way to block that. And they're already talking about executive orders with this.
Yeah, the Trump administration is very against really AI legislation just in general. They don't want states doing it. They don't want localities doing it. They have made that pretty clear.
Exactly. And so what you're going to be seeing is probably some lawsuits eventually, right? Because that's what happens when the state has a law and the federal government has a rule, and they are clashing on that, and so that will end up in a lawsuit if there is conflict there. Or the other option is maybe they want the data centers to come and then they just kind of allow it to happen and just blame the federal government. But right now, the federal government is saying that they're fully on board. And so it'll be interesting to see how localities respond to that. There is a lot more questions that people are asking about what data centers actually do, where they should be built, how much electricity should they be allowed to use? How much water should they be allowed to use? And I think elected officials are really starting to feel the tension and the anger of their constituents on this issue. And so that'll be interesting to see.
Well, given all that, what do you see as the future of data centers in this area?
From what I've heard, they seem to be coming. It's just a matter of where. And there's a lot of money. There's a lot of capital there. There's a lot of lobbying there. And so it'll be citizenry versus the oligarchs, in a sense, or all the money. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then there's also the residents and the people who actually believe in that as an industry. And so some people do really think, this industry, and I will say, I want to be clear too, there is a group of workers, like blue collar workers, who are really for data centers, like electricians, for example, get money, they get jobs from this thing. And they were in Prince George's County lobbying on behalf of the data centers. You have some construction groups that, they get paid also from this, and they grow from development. And so it's important to note that not all like blue collar workers or people like that are against these data centers, and they do in turn, in some ways, get paid and get jobs from just building things.
Jenny, thanks for being here. You really know your stuff.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is all for today here on CityCast GC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.